Well, before it starts, you're on your toes. You can hear a pin drop at a mile, I think. Your senses are so keen. But you get to notice certain things that would tell you would kind of like make you aware. Like all of a sudden, there's no birds chirping. How come? You know, is there something else, somebody, and usually there was. If there was quiet, animals were quiet, there's something going on. That's a given. Then you're just waiting for it. And most of the time, you got fired at first. They were the enemy. They were out there to kill me. So the trick was to not let them do that and to get them first. Winston Churchill said it best. He said, if it wasn't for the dying, the experience of war would be good for every man and woman in the world. If it wasn't for the dying. And it's true. It humbles you. I got into Vietnam in May of '68, and I arrived on a plane. I was a replacement. I didn't know anybody else on the plane, going or coming home. Well, by the time you got there, you knew people. You know, it was a 25-hour flight with 2 stops, and but yeah, you got on the plane, and I wasn't the only one. I think everybody on there was pretty much solo, and start talking. You know where you're going, yeah, and then start comparing notes. Hey, this guy back here, after a couple, 3 hours, it was pretty light conversation. I can't say that anybody was fearful, you know, like cowering in their seats and just being, you know, like that. It's pretty gung-ho, pretty gung-ho group. We landed in Long Ben Air Base, which was down in northeast of Saigon, by a place called Ben Hoa. We landed there, and we were in the 25th replacement depot for a couple of days until you got released to go to your unit that you were assigned to. I was assigned to headquarters company of the 2nd Battalion, 502nd Infantry. Headquarters Battalion held supply, commo, communications, medics, the office personnel, your company clerks and all that. That was headquarters company. And it was pretty much like basic training, you know, it was just go, 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 hectic, getting supplied, you know, people yelling at you, shouting orders, they go here, go there, trying to eat, trying to sleep. For that 24 hours, it was pretty, it was a rush, you know, it was something going all the time. They kept you on your toes with fake mortar attacks. They had mortar rounds going off in the distance, and the sirens would go off, and when you heard a siren go off, you were to dive for cover. This is in a sea of people. There's probably 2,000 or 3,000 guys milling around in this compound. Well, I wouldn't give it much more class than a regular prison. And they'd set the sirens off and everybody knocking people down, and you know, but it was all, most of it was fake. And they just did that to keep you jumping, keep you on your toes, and hopefully, this was no joke. You know, this was different than playing army in the backyard. But that still hadn't hit me yet. And you took radio watch for 6 companies in the field. All their messages, all their radio communications came into your command bunker. You had the company commander, his tent was right outside your door. If you needed him, you grabbed him. Okay, and then a lot of operations, then from that point, they filtered out to fire bases, where you got your big guns. artillery bases. There was a commo bunker on that base too. And that where anybody calling for fire support would call that base to get fire support. So there were radio operator a lot of guys say they were radio operators. Yeah, they carried the radio for the lieutenant or something, but they didn't talk on it. They couldn't call in artillery. They didn't know the grids. They weren't map readers and stuff like that, which we were trained to do. And so I started volunteering for the fire bases. And then I started volunteering for when the battalion commander went out with the company commanders on a mission. He would take a radio operator, and he would either pick you or he'd ask for volunteers. So I started volunteering for that, and that got me out in the bush a lot. Now, the area we went into was hot. This was in the Ashaw Valley. That was the place. That's where most of all the places I went were in the Ashaw. Either under one mission name or another, that's where we went. And it was very mountainous region, very jungle, up and down and all over the place. Thick enough to where if you were, we spent a lot of time in ravines. That's where we'd go up to the tops of these mountains, up ravines. And sometimes the point man, the lead element in your line, and his backup would be macheting the trail. And sometimes it'd take half hour, 45 minutes to go from here to that wall right there. It was so thick. Plus you're making a lot of noise too. So yeah, you moved real slow. We weren't in no hurry to get anywhere over there. You didn't have a date. Fell off a trail one time, twisted my ankle and got rashes. And I think anybody that's ever macheted their way through elephant grass for 100 feet ought to have a Purple Heart, because that shit just cuts you up. It's bad. But the bugs, the leeches, you get an open wound, and if you didn't keep it covered, get something on it, you'd have fly larvae in it and a leech hanging off of it. And well, that wasn't bad enough to look out for. The snakes were terrible. There's snakes everywhere over there.
There is a soldier. He belongs to any one of several races. His parents or grandparents may have been born in Germany or Russia or England or Turkey, but his nation is the United States of America. And now he is in Vietnam. Here, a soldier fights a difficult war against many enemies. He fights the heat and exhaustion of clawing his way up a four-stead ridge line under full ruck, and he fights the shivering cold of the monsoon rains under the flimsy protection of a hastily erected poncho. He fights insects, dirt, and discomfort. And of course, he fights against death. And through all this, he gains and maintains that aspect that makes a soldier what he is. A sense of humor in the face of adversity. Hope and driving determination in the pursuit of a difficult goal. Finally, a soldier is a proud man, knowing he has met and overcome the worst his world can offer. Having bested the most trying tasks, having performed the most difficult of jobs, he can justifiably have faith in himself. He is a soldier.
When did you realize that the Vietnam War was indeed a war and that this was different than basic training?
Boy, the first time I got shot at. First conflict.
Is that just an average patrol then?
Yeah, that brought all the reality in. I remember taking cover, E6 slapping me on the head and said, put your 16 on that ridge right over there, probably 100 yards away. He says, anything pops up, shoot it. So I got my sights on that ridge, and all of a sudden the head came up and I shot it. And I shot it because I saw the red. Shot him right in the head. Never saw him after that, but then I thought, did I just kill somebody? Yeah, I did. But I was familiar with weapons. My grandfather taught me how to hunt and all that stuff when I was 5 years old. You know, I knew how to tear weapons apart and clean them and all that. I knew weapons. I knew weapons killed. That's what I'm there for. And it was almost like an adrenaline rush that first time. It was like, oh, I guess I feel okay. If I wouldn't have got him, he'd have got me. I mean, you got to keep thinking that. I mean, you can't let guys that do are in a nut house this day. You couldn't let the enemy's deaths of you having to kill them affect you. You couldn't do that. You're not where you should be if you think that way. I was carrying the radio for either the company commander or the battalion commander, and wherever he was, my nose better be right up his butt, okay? Because he was the man. And I said I never left his side. Even if he was dead, I never left his side. And when he wanted that mic, his hand pop up and I slap him that mic. I'm right there. If it was a request for artillery, I had my book. I carried the book. I'd open that book up and I'd find the closest, do a map search real quick, find the closest artillery unit that could reach us. I would call that unit. They would confront me with code words out of the book that I would have to verify and answer back the proper answer, or I wouldn't get artillery. Because the Vietnamese would try that. They would try to call in artillery, your artillery on you. So that's why the codes were and that changed every month. There were 30 pages in that book for every day. And when you're using that radio, that 15-foot whip antenna is up in the air. That's a good target for the enemy. I've had 3 antennas shot off my radio before, you know. I mean, that was important. You know, you lost your radio, you didn't have a radio, you were screwed, basically screwed. And there's a better word for that, but I'm not going to say it. And that was more important than your weapon, your gun, for me. And I better be ready when the time comes to be able to act, you know, or I might get shot, you know. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure looking in a book, trying to read, and you got rounds buzzing around you and plinking off the trees above you and shrapnel flying through it and people yelling, people screaming. It's pretty hot, pretty hot. And it's pretty awesome. I mean, when you think about it years later, how the hell did I make it? You know, it wasn't my turn. We'd search around, we'd call out the village elders. We had translators and we had scouts that could pretty much pick an enemy out of the crowd. It was like on-the-job training, basically. We'd look in fire pits and underneath for trap doors and that. And once in a while you'd come across one, but for the most part, where we were at, we were pretty much liked by the civilian population up in the north. They were the ones getting tortured by these NVA hardcores coming down from North Vietnam through Laos and Cambodia and all that. They were a formidable enemy. They were well trained, they were well supplied at the beginning. They fought to the death. Yeah, we'd come in after firefights and find bodies that were chained to trees. I mean, there was no leaving. They were there, kill or die. The government wanted numbers. They wanted to make it look like we were just tearing them up. We were winning this. This fed the American public what they wanted to hear, that we're winning. We weren't winning. You know, at best we were at a draw. You know, that's why they were so hot about body count. How many did you kill? How many did you kill? Well, I don't know. Well, go back and count them. You know, if you see a bunch of bodies, which we did, we'd go in after B-52 strikes and do body count. Well, God, there's a head over here. Here's an arm sticking up out of the ground. Is that one guy? No, that's two. You know, that's what they wanted. I mean, it was a joke. You know, and we knew it. I mean, it was laughable.
An Eagle's Vietnam. A man, a soldier, travels thousands of miles to a land unlike any he has ever known. There, he finds a land of baking heat and smothering humidity which can change over the course of a few weeks into a flooded, chilled wasteland of mud and cold, driving rain. He finds poverty and despair and yet hope and progress. He finds that which is familiar and that which is very, very strange. An Eagle's Vietnam is a land of wonder and contrasts. From the rice paddies and sweeping coastal plains to the dark, sweeping jungles, this is a land of sensual and sometimes savage beauty. Huts of poor farmers stand next to temples where civilians, dead before a culture was born, celebrated the wonder of this exotic land. A trooper in a helicopter flying over the convoluted mountains and valleys looks with awe on the weird landscapes which seem to writhe in their coating of morning mist. The jungles could be those of Earth a million years ago, where dragons might walk beneath the triple canopy. But this is today, in an Eagle's Vietnam.
It was fun too. The little kids would come running up to you, and we'd give them chocolate and gum if we had it. And you know, they were pretty receptive to us for the most part. One time we spent the night in a village, and we taught the kids how to play jacks. You know, one of them had got the inside of a golf ball, a cork out of a golf ball that bounces. So we got in that, the little girls and the boys, you know, wanted to play a game. You know, what are we gonna play? We ain't got baseball. So one guy got a bright idea. We made some jacks out of some sticks, and spent that evening teaching the little kids how to play jacks. You know, even the boys, the little boys. Oh, they were crazy about it. It made you think you were doing something. If you can protect children, no matter what race, color, or creed, if you can take care of a little kid that ain't got no opinion about war, and don't care about you're a white guy from the other side of the world, you're friendly, you got chocolate, you make him laugh, he's happy. You know, there's none of that with children.
How were you treated by the South Vietnamese, and what were your attitudes towards them?
That's a good question. Were they there?
Yeah.
Oh, I say that jokingly because they were a bunch of chicken shits for the most part. They were sympathizers, most of them. They'd come and join you during the day, but at night they'd be on the other side of the wire throwing mortar shells at you. You couldn't trust any of them. They were there to stroke you. They were there to rob you. They wanted your money. They wanted your, you know, they come home with you and, you know, all this and that. They wanted out of there. You couldn't blame them. But they weren't fighters. I wouldn't say, I'm not going to say 100% because that's not true. But for the most part, the ones that we did missions with, might as well not have been that they were more harm than they were good. The Kit Carson Scouts, the Mountain Yards, the indigenous personnel of Vietnam are like the American Indian is here. They hated all Vietnamese. And they became scouts and allies to us. They were loincloth and barefoot with knives, and that was about it. They had their own like generals or, you know, officers, whatever, and they'd get orders from our command what we would like them to do and help us out. They'd go on scouting missions. They knew the country like the back of their hand. You know, they'd lived there for thousands of years, you know. They'd go out at night. They were night fighters in a loincloth, the men, in a loincloth, barefoot with a knife, and that was it. And they'd go looking for VC. And in the mornings when they came back in, when they killed a VC, they took off his ear to show that they had gotten one. And some of these guys would come back with 15, 20 years, you know. The atrocities of war. No, I never did that. I witnessed it done many occasions, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The guy's dead, you know. That's bad voodoo. If you do you know, mutilated already dead body. No, but there was guys that loved it. They were tough. My heart goes out to those people. Yeah. But the best memory was running into my high school buddy, Terry Bleed. Terry Bleed was a chopper pilot. Terry Bleed and I grew up together. We went to the same grade school from kindergarten on. We were leaving a mission. Choppers came in to pick us up. I hopped on a chopper, and all the pilots would have their names on the back of their helmets. And I climbed on this chopper, and I looked at the back of the pilot's helmet, said Bleed, B-L-E-E-D. I turned around, I whacked him on the shoulder, and he turned around, it was Terry. So we got back to base. Their aviation area was right next to our battalion, so we went out and partied that night. You know, that was probably the most funnest in country, was running into him, somebody you knew. We had fun. Most my friends were grunts, and they're a crazy bunch. They're still a crazy bunch to this day. You had Larry Jackson.
Yep.
Yeah. Larry is a good buddy of mine now. Larry's a Marine, and I'm the Army. We jack each other all the time. Larry was a platoon leader. He had 40 men under him. I couldn't do that. No way am I capable of doing what Larry did. But when we weren't on duty and we could party, we partied. And I'm telling you, we partied hardy.
You know you make me wanna.
I turned 21 years old in Vietnam on November 13th of 1968. And we got mortared that night. We had at Camp Eagle. I think they said 30 rounds came in. I don't remember nothing. And they said I was out going from bunker to bunker with Budweiser, case of Bud, handing out beers. I was the beer guy that night. I don't remember nothing about it. We had fun. We smoked, we drank. You don't have time to worry. You don't have time to think about what happened yesterday. You can't. You have to be vigilant 24/7, 365 days. Or you aren't going to make it back. But when it was time to party, it was time to party. You know. Heck, BC knew that. They let us party. Sometimes we'd be in a village where it was nightfall, and we were not allowed to cross the road because on the other side of the road is the NVA camped out. So we'd be right across the road from each other and nothing would happen. But you could hear them over there laughing, you know, talking, and they could hear us. We'd shout back and forth, you know, to each other, hey, screw you and your, you know. I knew some Vietnamese in those days. I can't remember the words now for it, but it made them mad, make you mad, you know.
On May 10, 1969, Operation Apache Snow began with one of the largest air mobile assaults of the Vietnam conflict. In this operation, 7 battalions were inserted into landing zones along the Laotian border. 10 artillery batteries were placed at fire bases only 16 hours before the invasion. By assaulting west of the A Shau Valley, the Allies caught the Communists by surprise, cutting them off from their escape routes into Laos. Sweeping eastward toward an area in the northern A Shau known to be a rich communist warehoused area, the Allies presented the enemy with a challenge. He must either surrender his caches and attempt to flee or stand and fight. The enemy's decision set the stage for one of the most difficult battles in division history.
Yeah. That was a tough one, that one. It was well-defended. NVA 29th Division was headquarters. They were tunneled in to the mountain around there, very well dug in. And they wanted them off. So the 101st assaulted that hill, oh God, 7 or 8 times in a matter of 10 or 11 days. My battalion and another battalion were across west of the A Shau Valley along a river that would take you into Laos. That was the blocking position for anybody trying to escape getting out of the A Shau, head into Laos. They were protected. We couldn't go into Laos to get them. We were probably a dozen clicks, which is 5-6 miles from where the actual battle was going on. But you could hear it in the distance. It was well defined. A lot of artillery. You could hear automatic weapon fire that far away. And it was constant. It was 24/7. And on the 20th of May, choppers came in with food and mail and that, and they yelled my name. What? It was, get on board, you're going home. It was time to leave. So I left, and it wasn't until, oh man, that the mobile ball came here in 1997 or 98. I had never seen it before. So I went downtown to look at it in its chronological order. Well, being I radio operator for every company in that battalion, and I knew a lot of guys. And a lot of them didn't come back from that one. Yeah. 1968 was the biggest death year for the United States over there. Just short of 15,000 people. And out of that 15,000, 1/4 of them, 25% of them, were 101st Airborne. Lost a lot of guys. So.
What was your worst memory from the war?
The worst memory? Believe it or not, I'd say the coming home. We got off the plane in Fort Dix, and the protesters were spitting on us and, throwing names and crap like that through the fence. And I can still picture just two people in my head to this day, a man and a woman. I told myself if I ever saw them again, I would kill them. They were just, it was terrible. It was unbelievable. It wasn't like when you left, I couldn't believe it. This country just treated us like shit when we got back. You can blame the government, but don't blame the soldier. We weren't doing it with our job. And however special I felt about myself that day went away. Yeah. Pretty much stayed away too. I'm not ashamed for what I did. I'm ashamed for what was done to me. That's the worst experience of it for me, believe it or not. It wasn't a battle. It wasn't seeing John Doe get killed. It wasn't seeing Freddie over here get killed. It wasn't seeing nothing like that. It wasn't losing people. It was bad. That was bad enough, yeah. But that went through my mind when I got all this flack, was friends of mine that didn't come back. You're dishonoring them. I'm alive, but you're dishonoring the dead. And that just does not sit with me. And it still doesn't to this day. I don't think it ever will. And so it didn't go through any debriefing. I walked into the house and there was nobody there. I just sat down and just, God, it was just, I can't describe it. Went into my room, and looked around, and it just seemed like so long ago that I was last here, and that was a year. It just was that 1 year just seemed like 5. That 1 year tour just seemed like 5. I aged a lot. I needed to be outside. I didn't like walls. I didn't like crowds. I didn't like noise. I ended up working at Carlson Roofing. They were about the trades were the only people hiring Vietnam vets in those days. And that's if you knew somebody. So I got hired on, and that was my profession. I still do it. And I lived in Rockford about 10 or 12 years, and if I wasn't working, I was drinking. And I honest to God, there was probably a 4 or 5, 6 year period there. I really couldn't tell you a whole lot other than the fact that I'm alive. Personally, I drank myself till where I got kicked out of the bar, or I ran out of money, or they closed every night. If it was late and I was worried about going to work the next day, I just drive down to the yard and spend the night there in my car and get woke up in the morning. I never missed work because of it. Never had a hangover or anything like that. I was numb for a long time. I did my thing. I tried to raise a family. That didn't work. Tried to get married. That didn't work. I finally moved to Arizona around 1980. I spent 25 years out there. And I quit drinking in 1983. And I lived in the mountains. And I got married, and I had 2 kids that were born at home. We lived on a dead-end road. It was 25 miles into town, and the only time I went to town was for the day. I went into work and I come home. Very quiet, very peaceful. I needed that. I went in a 19-year-old teenager. 2 years later, I got this big attitude. I got these problems. I got health problems. I got mental problems, dreams, nightmares. Didn't have nightmares before I went into service. I'm 67 years old now, and I'm still thinking, things still keep popping back into my head from my early days after the service that I'd forgotten, long forgotten, buried. All that flashes back, and it'll never go away. You just learn to live with it, deal with it. Adapt and survive. That's the name of the game. I'm better now than I was because now my 2 sons have grown up. They both served. I got one still in the Navy. My oldest one just got out after 12 years in the service. And his issues are my issues because he's my son. That's hard. That's hard to deal with my own stuff and worry about him too. We don't talk, him and I really don't talk war stories and that. Which Vietnam veterans, I lived with 3 of them in Arizona from Rockford. We had a house out there. We lived together 5 or 6 years, 4-bedroom house. We partied every night, no. We never talked about Vietnam, never. And I can't recall seeing anybody with any kind of advertising, a hat, a patch, like we do now. Never had that. That was something you didn't want to do. That targeted you from day one, from coming home to the Fort Dix mess, with the protesters and that. You pretty much hid the fact that you were a Vietnam vet for a long time. Now that we're out of the closet, or whatever you want to call it, that's why I'm here, telling my story. Never had a chance to before. And whether it's going to be good for me or not, we shall see. So far, so good. I got a lot of emotion doing this. Got a lot of emotion in me right now. But you guys need to know the true story about this stuff. What really happened, what went on.
When you look back on it, you weren't injured. Yes, the broken nose and stuff. You're very fortunate. Why do you think that is?
God's decided it wasn't time for me yet. The Reaper missed me. That's all it is. Fate is the hunter. It wasn't my turn. Maybe it's because he wanted me to come here tonight and tell my story to you. I don't know. I always said the way my military experience went those 2 years, I'd do the same thing. I'd volunteer for the draft, I'd volunteer for Vietnam, and I'd volunteer for I wouldn't change anything. And I wasn't looking to be a hero or, Medal of Honor winner or nothing. I mean, I got the Army Com, I got a Bronze Star, Good Conduct Medal, and the Vietnam campaign medals. And I was like the Army thanking me for my year. It wasn't anything specific, The whole year was a mission, a long mission, I didn't do anything specifically. You ask me how many people I killed, I don't know. I know 3 or 4 for sure, but beyond that, I don't know. I mean, who knows? I might have called artillery in on 100 of them, I don't know. But no, I was no hero, but I was amongst a bunch of them. We had B Company, Bravo Company of my unit had 4 Medal of Honor winners in it in like 5 months. Guys were just something else. I was with some hardcore, badass people. And I'm serious when I say badass people. And there's a lot of guys over there doing the shooting, doing the killing, that's what they wanted to do. And they were good at it. And if you kept your mouth shut and your ears open around those guys, you'd make it. I will say, you owe it to the ones that didn't make it. You owe it to them to live your life to the fullest in their honor. That's how you honor them and their demise, is by remembering them and living your life to the best you can, be the best person you can. War will humble you. It will make you appreciate things more. It doesn't take a whole lot to make a guy happy, after you witness some of this crap. So. The brotherhood is unmatched. I mean, it's a good feeling to have known and to have been rubbed elbows and been with some of these people that I knew, living and dead. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
When I first watched Dan's interview, I remember being really nervous because I just remember hearing his amazing story and trying to come up with what am I going to do for this documentary? I was really nervous because he had such an amazing story, and then, there's me, little senior in high school, trying to come up with this great documentary. But I think all that kind of went away the first time that I met Dan, because I was so nervous to meet him because, it was almost like meeting a celebrity. Because, you know, you've listened to his story so many times, and it was like all the fear of, like, what if he doesn't like me? You know, what if I let him down somehow? But I think that kind of meeting him for the first time, it was the realization of, you know, I'm making this for an actual person. Like, as obvious as that sounds, you know. It was kind of a shock, I guess, and it kind of brought me down to reality that it's not about what I want for this documentary. It's more about like representing his story in a way that is going to be something that he can be proud of. And I think that, like, when I met him for the first time, that's kind of like when the importance of the project kind of hit me, and like that's when I kind of realized, you know, I'm not just making this movie, I'm doing this for him. I think the most influential thing that Dan has taught me is that life keeps moving on. You know, I can't like relate to his story directly because obviously I've never been in that situation, but I think that kind of the way that his outlook on life is very positive and constructive, I guess. Like, he's been through so much, but he doesn't let that negatively affect who he is as a person. He was telling me about how he would meet troops as they're coming home from the airport, and he said that that was really good therapy for him to be able to have that experience of making a positive impact in something that he didn't necessarily have. And I think that's really important and something that a lot of people can definitely learn from, is to take the experiences that you've had, the good and the bad, and use that to make yourself a better person. And that's something that's definitely impacted me a lot throughout this process. And to Dan, I want to say thank you for being a part of this project and for just teaching me so much. Honestly, you've really taught me more than any textbook ever could. And I don't think that I'll ever find the words to, I guess, like accurately express how much you've taught me. But I just want you to know that your story has definitely made an impact on me. And I hope that it's something that you're proud of and that you can, you know, look back on. Thank you.